Hey everybody, I'm writing director Len Kabasinski of Killer Wolf Films, welcoming you to a special Christmas episode of our Forgotten Movie Den. We've got a special double feature that me and the one and only Joe from Ozone Nightmare are going to talk about tonight. One is probably my favorite all-time B-movie, Christmas B-movie, if you will. Many of you that know me probably can already guess what that is, but we're going to talk about it anyways. And then Joe's got one we're going to talk about, which I think is one of the best B-movie sequels that's better than the original, and how often can we really say that? So we're going to bring in Joe from Ozone Late Night in a second here. First off, for all those watching on my Patreon, thank you so much. If you don't know about my Patreon, it's only $2. All my movies are on there. I've been upscaling a lot of them lately. In fact, Swamp Zombies 1 from 20 years ago, the first movie I ever did, just got put up there within the last few days here. So go check it out, an upscale version. I think it's pretty good for what it is for being shot on the old Canon GL2 on mini DV tape 20 years ago. So the upscale, I think, for that went pretty decent. But you're the judge of that, not me. So patreon.com/killerwolffilms is the very best way to support my works, past, present, and going forward into the future here. Also, if you didn't know, I have a newer YouTube channel. It's at The Real Len K. We all know my other one got canceled or deleted or whatever you call it in 2024, but that's gone. But there is a new one, and it's at The Real Len K. All my podcasts, some of my guest spots, all that is on my YouTube channel. However, Patreon, as I said, is the very best place to get my guest spots, podcasts, movies, all that kind of stuff is on there. New happenings, Wendigo Bound by Blood, one of my older pictures from about 15 years ago now. That's apparently coming to Tubi TV sometime within the next couple weeks here. So they got their closed captioning and all that done. So you'll see Wendigo on there shortly. And that's an upscale version of that film as well that they're going to put on Tubi. So I hope you check it out. But patreon.com/killerwolffilms, the best place to check it out. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Joe from Ozone Late Night and get this party started right now. As promised, I now bring in the one and only Joe from Ozone Late Night. Going into Christmas here, we're in December, right? We've gotten back-to-back blizzards where I'm at here in northwest Pennsylvania here. But Joe, how are we doing?
I'm doing great, and winter in Northern California means that it rained for a couple of days, because that's as close as you get to a snow-covered winter here. I don't even remember snow, really, barely at all. So, yeah, a little bit of rain is what we call winter here. So I'm doing very well. Great set of movies to talk about to bring us into the holidays. Oh, man, yeah, so I am great, and I'm excited to talk about these films.
Yeah, I love both of these movies we're going to talk about tonight. Anybody that knows me probably knows what my favorite B movie is in terms of, Christmas movies is. I think if everybody's like, what's your favorite Christmas movie? Well, of course I'm going to say Gremlins, but that's like an A-lister, and we're not going to talk about an A-list movie tonight, Joe. So we're going to get right into it. My favorite B movie at Christmas time that I watch literally every year. I kid you not, Joe, I watch this movie every year. And this year was no different. We're going to talk about 1989's Elves. So, Joe, when we talk about Elves, even though there's only one elf in the movie, what did we see when we watched Elves?
Elves might be the craziest thing that Hitler ever came up with, and he was batshit insane. Apparently, the ultimate goal of the apparent Fourth Reich, I guess, was that Hitler thought that maybe if he made half-human, half-elf hybrids, that he would finally conquer the world, the universe, and every galaxy in between. So we get to see as you said, a singular elf that is accidentally resurrected when a group of girls go out to do something in the woods, and one of them cuts themselves, and we suddenly have an elf that is moving around, has a little bit of trouble closing his mouth, but is silently stalking the main character as Dan Haggerty very, very calmly reacts to insane things that are said to him, until he gets into a fist fight with Nazis in the house where the original girl finds out that her grandfather is actually her father, and her mother just likes to kill cats. This movie's got it all, and it's a blast.
I love Elves so much it hurts my heart. And yeah, we mentioned the cast. The only one you're ever going to really remember out of anything in Elves is Dan Haggerty, who, of course, Grizzly Adams went on to a long career, passed away probably, 6 or 7 years ago now. I think Dan Haggerty passed away. But this is right around when he exploded onto the scene with like movies for PM Entertainment, like Repo Joe or whatever it was. And that one's not, that one can't even hold a candle to what Elves is. But Elves has got the most craziest, you're right, batshit story ever. This was made by pretty much my favorite studio, headed by Ted Pryor's brother there, David A. Pryor. And Winters had AIP, Action International Pictures, and that is what picked up Elves. And Action International Pictures was all about the direct-to-video boom, and pretty much the golden year for that is probably, I mean, I don't know, you may disagree, but I think the golden age for direct-to-video is probably 88, 89, somewhere in there. Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say, basically the end of the 80s, 7, 8, and 9 are really where you start to see this stuff and it gains a lot of steam. So I would have no problem with 88 or 89. I think that's really when this thing hit its peak. And you just got some of the most magnificent straight-to-video stuff. And as you said, AIP in the top 5, if not the top 2 of studios that did this type of stuff. And this is a perfect example of why when you see AIP on something, you should watch it, because this is just magnificent.
I agree a zillion % with that. If you see AIP on it, watch it, especially in the 80s. There was another AIP company that was in the 70s and stuff. This is not that. It has nothing to do with this. This is David A. Pryor's company with Winters. I can't think of his first name, but they ran AIP, and most of the movie shot in Alabama and around his house and junkyards with Future Force with David Carradine. That's an AIP film. That should be all you need to know right there to check out AIP. They made Future Force and Future Zone with the late David Carradine there. So, but going into Elves, Dan Haggerty is a down-on-his-luck cop that needs a job at his local, like, Kmart-type looking place. And he becomes Santa Claus, because Santa Claus is murdered by an elf after he assaults a person sitting on his lap that was just there, telling Santa what they wanted, and assaults this person, and then goes back to do, I believe, cocaine in his room, and the elf kills him, Joe.
Yes, one of the more bizarre scenes in a movie full of them, where for some reason he decides to, demand oral sex from the young lady on his lap, who's not so young as she's supposed to be by any stretch, and then goes back and is somehow upset that apparently demanding fellatio is something that the store looks down on, decides to do a couple of lines, at which point he is stabbed in the dick by the elf, 10 times, and while I certainly wouldn't enjoy that myself, I don't know that it kills you that quickly. However, it is probably the one example where the elf is the hero, briefly, where it's like, yes, I think I'd like to see somebody who does this stabbed in the dick as well. So it is a weird scene in every way, including the fact that they don't pick up the tape outline for what seems like far too long after the man's body has been removed. And so, yeah, that is just one example of a number of scenes that you just sit there and think, yeah, I've never seen anything like this before, and you'll probably never see anything like it again. And that's exactly what Elves is, almost beginning to end. Just beautiful scenes of bizarre entertainment. Yeah,
the dialogue in this, and I'll spit out a couple examples as we go. The dialogue I absolutely love in this film, and we're not going to just do the Santa said oral thing, but I'm going to go back because I was going to save this for the end. But I just got to throw it out there now, Joe, because I think this is a perfect spot for it. This is a PG-13 movie, Joe.
Yeah, that's the incredible part, is that I honestly have no idea how a movie that has graphic murder, Nazis, and a gratuitous death scene featuring a fully nude, full frontal woman somehow got PG-13. I can't understand it. There's no sense. This movie defies all expectation, even in the ratings. So I guess just chalk it up to that. AIP does it again.
Yeah, there's lots of fun stuff. Mind you, elf, a la any foreign type creature like the Predator or something like that, has his own elf vision. But really all it looks like, Joe, is just a blurry footage.
Yeah, basically you could just call it Vaseline vision. That's what it is. Now, granted, when the entire Fourth Reich hinges on copulating with a victim of incest, then maybe smeary vision is going to be the least of your concerns afterwards. So I don't know. One thing that's incredible about this movie when you watch it, if you go with the lore of the film, is to remember that Hitler pinned the entire hopes of his future empire on this particular creature who doesn't, a good kick would seem to be able to send this thing through a window. And yet this is the entire hopes of, again, the Fourth Reich. So maybe we understand why Hitler was never going to succeed, because if this was the best thing he could come up with, then yeah, I'm not surprised that he lost in the way that he did.
Yeah, we go back to our heroine of the story, who it looks like she's probably about 35 to 38 years old. She's meant to be a teenager here. Whatever, we can run with that. That happens in a ton of movies, not just horror movies. But I just went and saw Wicked at the movie theater, and I think they're supposed to be college-aged kids in this sorcery school. They're not college-aged kids, people. They're like 38 years old. So Elves is no different, whether we do B movies or multi-zillion-dollar budget movies. We mentioned at the beginning, I mentioned that the heroine of the story is like a 38-year-old teenager. Really, I think her brother is the one that needs slapped by the elves. As we get her brother, who he appears to be 8 years old or so, with terribly foul language throughout, trying to blackmail his sister at the beginning of the movie and think, you can't make this up. Elves is action-packed from start to finish. But there's a couple characters you really want to be slapped. And her brother is probably number one on the list, Joe.
Yeah, outside of the main heroine, who I actually do feel bad for most of this film, basically the rest of her family is a dumpster fire. And yes, the younger brother, I almost sit there because people will say, oh yeah, RoboCop 2, that kid swears a lot. And I'm like, it's not the only movie where that happens. Maybe somebody watched this and was inspired, because yeah, the little brother, he becomes a lot better later, but he starts off, and again, you do feel bad for this poor woman, and she is a woman, because it just seems like she's having nothing but misery and suffering between the mother, who I think the mother got off light. I would have loved it that if the cat had been brought back and had clawed the mother's face to ribbons, because I mean, this is one of these characters. I think I hated the mother worse than the elf. And that's saying something, but man, what a mega bitch. So yes, this poor woman, she was doomed from the start. And the whole movie, it's just like, what's the next thing that this poor woman is going to go through? And the hits just keep on coming.
Yeah, we mentioned the mother, a great villain character, played by, I want to say Lind is her last name, but anyways, I'm not looking this stuff up now, but she didn't go on to too much. But she was Larry King's girlfriend during the filming of this movie, I believe. Talk show host, late night show, Larry King guy. Yeah, this was his girlfriend who played the mom in this movie, so go figure, right? But yeah, we mentioned she murders this woman's cat, this teenager woman's cat, by drowning it in a toilet. So yeah, that sets the stage for, we know who the villains of the movie are, but we're really supposed to think that Elf is the villain, right? But no, your family's a dumpster fire. Going forward, Santa, as we mentioned, is murdered at work and replaced by Dan Haggerty, who just happened to be in the wrong place at the right time, I guess, to do a movie like Elves. But after that, one of the best lines, and I wanted to highlight this, Joe, and I have a card, I have indexes like 4 things long here of just stuff I have to get off my chest about this movie. But one of the great lines early in the movie is the mom asked the daughter, how did work go? And she was like, well, Santa got murdered, kind of thing. So...
Yeah, there is this weird casualness to a lot of different characters in the movie that you sit there and think, this is not how normal people talk or react, which is, of course, what makes it so wonderful to watch, including Dan Haggerty, who for most of the movie really very level-headedly reacts to almost everything going on. He never gets all that upset. He doesn't get all that angry, not till the very end. You know, things are happening around him that just seem insane. He's like, yeah, well, I got to get a job. So are you hiring a Santa? Meanwhile, wait a minute. Santa got crotch stabbed to death. There's no problem here. This is an ex-detective who doesn't see anything odd about what's going on. And even later, when he starts unveiling everything, the professor scene, we'll get to that. But again, just kind of goes, yeah, well, you know what? I got to make a living, so we'll just go with it.
Yep, it was a rough day at work. Santa got murdered. It is the actual line said by the teenage woman that works at the store. So and that's after the elf vision and all that stuff that we mentioned there. the store manager, I'm just going to throw this out there for Beavis and Butthead fans that might watch this show. The store manager highly resembles the candy sale episode manager on Beavis and Butthead. Look it up. See if you agree with me. Beavis and Butthead fans, you'll know what I'm talking about. But he talks like him. His mannerisms are like him. Go check out the candy sale episode and you will die when you come and watch Elves and see the store manager, because he is just like him. Outside of that, the elf is called a ninja gremlin probably 10 times in the opening 30 minutes, Joe.
Yeah, this, like I said, this movie just keeps going from one bizarre thing to another. And it really just, you never get a chance to stop, and this is probably good. You don't get to really stop and think about what's going on, because every time you sit there and your kind of jaw drops and your eyes are bulging out of your head, then the next scene comes along and you're just back there again going, whoa, 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 what? Because let's frame this correctly. The main arc of this movie, outside of the opening and what all the opening events set up, is everything happens because these three young girls who talk just like young girls and look like young girls with giant quotes around it. Basically, this is Chopping Mall again, where they just want to get laid in an apartment store, which is such a strange thing that comes up in movies of this era. When I was younger, I don't think I ever had a scenario like this come up for me. Maybe it was different 10 years before, but this idea that everybody wants to get laid in a store is a strange fixation of these films. And that's the central thing to this too. All the main events happen because these three girls want to stay over and have some guys and have sex in a department store. So I guess this was something that happened in the mid to late 80s. I guess I just missed that particular fad.
I missed that by a long shot, but yeah, you know, Haggerty Santa, I think we can all agree, is the best Santa. I mean, come on now. But we're going forward, you can't take the former detective out of Haggerty in this film. So Santa, Haggerty Santa, turns into Detective Haggerty Santa, and he's going to solve this elves, even though we know it's one elf, elf problem. A blatant ripoff of the Dawn of the Dead tagline is in this movie, and I believe they say it twice. And they're talking about Hitler, and he's going to make this master elves race, and when there's no more room left in hell, the elves will walk the earth. And that's a direct ripoff of the tagline of Dawn of the Dead with George Romero. I'm pretty sure it's Dawn of the Dead. I'm not going to look it up, but I'm pretty sure it's Dawn of the Dead. But yeah, so there's a plagiaristic thing there. Maybe somebody was a big fan of that film. You know, who knows? But it's said numerous times when going with they're talking about the occult and you know what they were doing and stuff, and then they drop the rip-off tagline of Dawn of the Dead a couple times.
Yeah, it has to be what was meant to be an homage, because there's no way you hear that and don't know. I mean, anybody who watches this movie almost is going to be a built-in kind of B-movie or horror fan, so you would be familiar. So yes, it's a very obvious line. It's, I guess, supposed to be kind of funny with the elves substituted in for the dead. That's fine. I'm delighted by stuff like that. But as you mentioned, the MVP of the film is absolutely Dan Haggerty. And I don't know that anybody else at this time could have done this role as well as this. It saves the movie. Anybody else, and this movie it's still going to be funny. It's still going to be something that you would know about, but is it as watchable? I don't think so. He is just perfect. I cannot imagine better casting.
Yeah, I mean, he is living now. Mind you, Haggerty catches the girls and their boyfriends or whatever, you know, in the department store kind of thing. But he's not supposed to be there either, because he was kicked out of his ramshackle mobile home that he was living in kind of thing. So he starts, you know, living in his studio apartment that somehow is inside of Kmart. Anyways, he catches them, but they're like, well, he can't arrest us. He's Santa, which is another great line in the movie, Joe. He can't arrest us. He's Santa. And but no, and then everything's fine, and then the elf, you know, comes in, and we know it goes from there. But Dan Haggerty, Santa Dan Haggerty, goes into detective mode, and where does he go to solve this mystery, Joe? He goes to his local library, where he goes to the Dewey Decimal System to find books on the occult, Joe.
Yes, the library scene where he comes in and the librarian directs him to section 666 because that's subtle, where he can find a book to identify this little figure that was carved in the floor, and apparently none of the other cops noticed it, but Haggerty picked up on it. So clearly the detectives in this town suck because nobody saw it, and it's just a good thing that he was there working as Santa and happened to notice that this little eldritch symbol was carved in the floor. But yes, he goes to the library, and then we go from there to where he meets up with one of my favorite characters in any B movie that's ever existed, which is the professor. Oh, the professor. The scene with the professor is perfection. You could not possibly make it any better. This guy is trying to talk like he's supposed to be, I'm guessing, 60 or so, or a kind of an elder who has knowledge of the Third Reich and the occult. And yet he looks like he's probably about the same. No, he probably looks younger than the main actress to some degree. Oh, it's ridiculous. And he's talking and he's going in this again, he's trying to do the kind of the empty-headed professor thing with all this knowledge, and he's going on. And there was a line that he said, which I believe I noted down. I want to make sure I quote it correctly, where he said, hold on, I want to make sure I get this right. This is such a magnificent line that I do not want to blow it. All right. So the line was, quote, "If you could ignore their brutality, you'd have to say they were just a bunch of crackpots," which may be the weirdest line I've ever heard said about the Nazis in any film I've ever seen. One of many great quotable lines. That one might be my favorite.
Oh, God. Yeah, that character's amazing. Well played by that guy, too. I mean, he's fantastic. We can't make this up, people. You've got to see Elves, but we're not done talking about Elves yet. Santa, another great line by Dan Haggerty, who he says right around that department store scene after it's broken up here in a minute. What happened to the youth of today? You don't believe in anything anymore. This was shot in 1989. That's a very relevant line in 2024. But you can't make it up. We go forward. The teenager woman lead joins Haggerty because now they both get fired from their jobs, Joe, from staying overnight and sleeping in the department store, or him having his apartment in the department store. Whatever it is, the store manager fires both of them. So now they have nothing but time on their hands to solve this elf mystery because, of course, nobody believes them that there's a little midget elf ninja, what did they call it, a 10 times ninja gremlin or whatever they called him there. But they have nothing but time on their hands now, and they're going to solve the mystery. It is a two-man Scooby-Doo team here, Joe.
Yes, and now suddenly the grandfather has had a change of heart, and now he wants to give the young woman the tools to fight the Nazis, and they show up, and they don't know why he suddenly turned on them, and honestly, we haven't found out why either. So yes, now we have Santa, and they keep calling him Santa, even when he says, "My name is Mike." I think at least 6 or 7 times, every time he shows up, "Hey, Santa's here." And I think that's supposed to be a running gag, but Haggerty is understandably a little bit irritated that they keep calling him that. And so we get to this ultimate conclusion where they finally all get into the house. And amazingly, Haggerty never actually, if I remember, fights. There's no physical between him and the elf. He only fights the Nazis, because I was sure that we were going to get some kind of him throwing a doll around a room or so. I mean, honestly, it's the only thing this movie is really missing. But in the end, the most astonishing thing about this entire story, as far as the actual story, is that the lesson of the film is that if you dream of a woman with swastikas for nipples, then you've got some kind of problem you should have recognized earlier, which is both correct and insane because, no exaggeration, what we find out is she'd drawn this picture of a woman, which was way at the beginning of the movie, and then she is shown that if you connect these weird dots on the woman's breasts, they're a pair of swastikas. And I think at that point, my brain just leaked out of my head and fell on the floor because it both makes complete sense within this movie and it makes no sense, but I love it.
Yeah, you mentioned Haggerty never fights the elf. We don't get that part. So that's one of the downfalls of the movie. We don't get an actual elf fighting Dan Haggerty. But Haggerty finally goes ape near the end of the movie and he fist fights a bunch of Nazi characters and stuff. the elf explodes at the end of the movie. I don't know how or why. Something, she stabs him and he explodes. It's a very like, huh? How did that happen? Much like in Jaws 4, The Revenge, when in the home video version he gets bludgeoned with the boat hull there, and then he explodes for some reason. And they're like, wow, how did that happen? Elves, similar thing there. Another great line. This is towards the end of the film too. Is hey, are we gonna? The little boy who was a total jerk at the beginning of the movie. Hey, are we going to be okay? And the lead is like, no, Grandpa's a Nazi. And I thought, what a great line. And the hits keep coming with those kinds of things in this movie, Joe.
Yeah, as you said, we see the grandfather making some kind of stone dagger or something. It's not really ever explained. But yes, Dan Haggerty must have gone to the greatest anger management class in the world, because it takes about an hour and 10 minutes before he finally even starts yelling about anything. So I applaud his ability of self-control. But yeah, there's a point where you're like, okay, is he going to, let loose? And even when the closest he comes is when his lighter doesn't work. And that's how he finds a bomb in his car, which leads to a great scene where an obviously not Dan Haggerty jumps out of a moving car. And then, of course, one of the famous lines, which is where he demands to know if the Nazi that was trying to blow him up, is that your elf? Which is just, again, there is a skill in saying these lines as an adult actor, knowing that you're going to say to somebody, is that your elf, in a Nazi elf film? And Dan Haggerty, the true professional, delivers.
He delivers it. Another great line by your favorite professor character there is near the end of their conversation. He's talking to Dan Haggerty in this scene, mind you. He goes, well, do you believe I'm this crazy guy? This is Haggerty talking to him. Haggerty's like, well, do you think I'm crazy for all this stuff I'm telling you? Do you think I saw an elf, or would you believe in elves or something? And the professor said, no, I don't believe in elves, but God did. My jaw just hit the floor, Joe.
Yeah, now, I will admit that I do not have the Bible memorized front to back, but I don't know what that's referring to. So feel free in the comments to point it out. There may be a line referring to a Nazi elf in the Bible. I can't rule it out, but I don't remember it. So yeah, this is the thing about this movie, and this is why I think you and I both love it, is as a whole, it would be fine by itself, but there's just these standout scenes, and there's so many of them, where many B movies might have one or two moments that you remember. This movie is just packed, and so any of its problems are immediately erased by the fact that you have to sit there and think that somebody wrote this movie, wrote this script, and said, yeah, we're keeping all this. This all works. Let's go. Now, I'm pretty sure that when the Santa was doing coke at the beginning, we can probably infer that that belonged to the writers, because that's about the only way that much of this movie makes sense. And like a lot of movies from this time period, I am happy that that's what was fueling it, because no sane person sits down and allows this movie to be made. This is a movie that was made by coke, and I'm happy it's here. It's just so good.
I watch it every year, like I said. I'm not lying, people. I watch it every single year. And you know what? Me and Joe, we've mentioned this before. There's so many companies out there like Kino Lobe or Vinegar Syndrome and stuff like that. Why don't we have a better copy of this film, Joe?
Yeah, that is the one thing that I'm really shocked about, because I was sure that I must have missed a release of it, because it seems irresistible that, Severin or somebody has not picked this up, because, I've watched other Vinegar Syndrome releases. I've watched other stuff by Kino and Severin, and there are many things that, while perfectly good, are not at this level. So how is it that this got missed? So either, and this is what I dearly hope, either there is some kind of really big release coming where they are packing this thing with interviews, extras, and making ofs, which I think is worth doing, or I don't know, maybe the rights are owned by somebody who won't let them go and wants to remake it. I can't imagine, but it needs to get rectified yesterday.
Yeah, I agree 100%. This is, and I'll say that for a lot of films in the AIP library. And I'm specifically looking at something like Vinegar Syndrome that deals with a lot of other like subsidiary labels and stuff that they use and work together, co-work with a lot of these other smaller companies, and they go and put out something like the one Ninja movie that we reviewed not too long ago, and things like that. This one and a lot of the IIP library, especially stuff like, Future Force with David Carradine, I think we could both say that's cult movie status there, with that one, with Future Force and things like that. There's really no excuse not to have a really good copy of Elves, because when you go to YouTube and watch it or something like that, it's not on Tubi, it's not on Amazon, it's not on any of those places. You have to go to YouTube to watch it. And, the end is murky. You can't see a whole lot crisply what's like going on. And then you got to wonder, is that really the film or is that just the transfer that you're watching on YouTube? I need to know. So I need Vinegar Syndrome or Severin, like you mentioned. Somebody pick this up and do this movie properly because it deserves it, Joe.
I have to believe it is actually a process. There's just something that makes me think that this is one that they're probably saving for kind of one of their mid-year or whatever big releases or a surprise thing. It just makes too much sense that this is, because this fits too well into, especially what Vinegar Syndrome does. Like there's like Blade, so that one got one. We've seen movies of this caliber that have been released. So I have to think that they've got it and they're either just cleaning it up, because maybe it is that they couldn't find a really good copy and there's a lot of work involved. That does happen. Or like I said, they really want to make this kind of a special thing. And maybe they're going to do a Dan Haggerty series, a whole retrospective. I'd be all for it. So whatever it is, I have to think it's coming. So I just wanted to get here sooner.
Yeah, and I think my closing thoughts on Elves for everybody that loves B movies, Elves is a must-see. In my opinion, you cannot miss it. It is an absolute top tenner all time in terms of just Christmas B movies you have to see once in your life. I would put Elves easily in that category. It is shot on 35 millimeter. When I say something like David A. Pryor, this isn't the David A. Pryor that did a shot on VHS Sledgehammer or something like that in the early 80s. This is AIP cinema. Everything's on 35 millimeter film, that kind of thing. So there's a print somewhere. Hope somewhere. Ted Pryor, where's Ted at? Ted, where's your brother's stuff at? Because we're trying to get a good copy of this one. And it's not just this. AIP's just littered in their library of stuff like this that you really need to watch. And I think Elves is one of them. But it's Christmas time. I'm going to get this episode out soon for you guys. So when you're watching it, go watch it before Christmas. Don't watch it with your kids or your kid brother, kid sister, or your nieces or nephews, but watch it and have fun with it, Joe. I can't say enough. Elves is so fast-paced. It's never boring. There's always something that like grabs your attention, but in my opinion, Joe, the one thing that will grab your attention throughout the movie, every several minutes there, is some jaw-dropping piece of dialogue, Joe.
No, I agree. I think the only negative thing I could say about this movie is that we don't have a better copy of it, because I think more people would find this to be, we picked a perfect Christmas double feature for B-movie fans, and this is the first one in there. And really, again, I just wish we had a nice, crisp copy of it, because I think it is so worth seeing. It is such a fun and lunatic film that there's movies of this era were made both because people were in a rush to fill video stores, and a lot of the people making the films were high on something. And that combination, we'll probably never see it. Well, we'll never see it again. Video stores are gone. And so you get this kind of magic period of time where movies like this that no sane person would look at and say, yes, I'm going to put money into this. They're like, we have to make something, make it. And you get something like this. And it's beautiful. And I just wish that we had that nice presentation so that people could find it and enjoy it the way it should be. Something on film should be cleaned up and seen, just like New York Ninja. You mentioned it. Like, that is such a perfect restoration of something worth seeing, and Elves is right up there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. See Elves. But we mentioned we don't got one movie tonight, we have two. And the next one is one of the, I would say, we can say rare cases where the sequel surpasses the original. And in this case, I love the original of the next film we're going to talk about, but the sequel is even better. And we're going to talk about Maniac Cop 2, William Lustig's Maniac Cop 2, starring Robert Davi. Joe, when we talk about Maniac Cop 2, what did we watch?
Well, if you liked Maniac Cop 1, good news, you're getting more of the same thing, plus a bonus maniac in the form of Turkel, who was supposed to be played by Joe Spinell, who sadly passed before he could play the role. And I don't I have read both that this was meant to be kind of a grafting of Maniac and Maniac Cop together, and also that that's not true. In my heart, it will always be true because I can imagine Joe Spinell in this movie so easily. But yes, I could.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that too, Joe. Continue, but yeah, I'm going to highlight this character you're talking about because I think it's important.
Well, I echo your sentiments that this is a case where, and I love the first one, but man, Maniac Cop 2 is the first movie done to perfection. So as you said, we now expand our cast list a bit. Our Maniac Cop has come back from the dead. He is still on the same rampage he was on in the first movie, except now he looks a hell of a lot cooler, and he's got a new buddy to help him in his killing duties. But basically, it's Matt Cordell is back from the dead, and now he's basically facing, well, not for very long. We have Bruce Campbell, and I cannot remember the actress's name who was in the original film, but they show up. There you go. Yes, so they show up for a bit. They are dispatched, which even though there's a part of me that wishes that they survived, I kind of like that the movie just killed them both off. And then we're off to the races with Robert Davi and Claudia Christian, who are playing. Davi is the perfect grizzled, jaded, cynical cop who is both dedicated to justice and doesn't give a shit about anything. And he is going up against the Maniac Cop, who, as I said, picks up this murderer of strippers, Turkel, who is a big, bushy-beard lunatic, who is in every way the opposite of the kind of, out uniformed, silent, tough, big maniac. And then we have this small, wiry, kind of laughing and giggling lunatic. And the two of them wreak mayhem in a movie that is filled with just these great big action sequences and then comes to a literal fiery ending. This movie is fucking fantastic. That's the only thing I can say about it. I love Maniac Cop 2.
I really, really, really like this movie a lot, Joe. And I think we didn't even mention the writer of this is Cohen, Larry Cohen, the late Larry Cohen. A lot of people involved with this picture are no longer with us. But the late Robert Zadar, the late Larry Cohen, Michael Lerner, who plays the corrupt commissioner, he passed away just about a year ago. But I'll say this, a yes or no answer real quick, Joe. This is William Lustig's finest moment as a director.
Absolutely. No question about it.
And I will say in the long, and he has been a working actor for a long time. He just passed away a few years ago as well. Leo Rossi is his name that played Turkel. Is this Leo Rossi's finest moment in his career as an actor?
It's the best one I've seen, so I'm going to say yes.
Yes, I agree 100%. I've seen dozens and dozens and dozens of his films. Leo Rossi is great. He is in Relentless, so William Lustig trusted him, obviously, because he would have known him as the good guy detective from the Relentless movie. That was a theatrical release not long before, right around this time, actually. Relentless is when Judd Nelson broke out from his Breakfast Club babyface and became a serial killer in the movie Relentless. And Leo Rossi, this is directed by William Lustig, but I think Maniac Cop 2 is actually William Lustig's shining moment kind of thing. The action, everything is great. This movie is breakneck paced action from start to finish. I can't say enough about this movie, but this movie, the big difference, and you mentioned Maniac Cop 1, which I love that movie as well. Maniac Cop 1, when I do interviews or podcasts and people want to talk to me about, Grindhouse cinema and that kind of era, Maniac Cop 1, I keep pointing to, that felt like the end of Grindhouse cinema. Maniac Cop 1, I would say, is a Grindhouse film. But then after that, name something after that you would consider Grindhouse. You know what I'm saying? I really feel like that was.
I agree.
That was kind of the end.
I think that was the end
of that New York Grindhouse. And we know William Lustig loves New York and films most of his stuff there and everything. But it was kind of, Maniac Cop felt like the end of an era for that kind of thing, in my opinion. And then we come into Maniac Cop 2, which was only made a couple years later, and we have a very slick, polished, beautifully lit, beautifully shot, beautifully acted. Everything in this movie, this is a top-notch looking B-movie, Joe.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is, there's so much about this movie that I absolutely love. And I think part of it is that Lustig either recognized or just kind of decided to do something different. And I think it was smart to not try to replicate the feel of Maniac Cop 1. And instead, this is basically your Jason Voorhees of Maniac Cop. And I actually would say that I would put Zadar's performance in this right there with Kane Hodder in terms of all of it. It's all physicality. He has to do so much physical acting. He has one line in the whole movie, which I don't even know if it's his voice, but he is doing everything through just performance of how he's standing, how he's moving. And what makes Leo Rossi so good as a counterpoint is Rossi's doing the opposite. So Rossi is very kind of manic and fidgety. And again, his physical presence is the opposite, where Zadar gets to be just big and like a walking wall. In fact, there's a whole sequence where he's literally walking through walls, which is just outstanding. But this movie is perfectly constructed to be what it is. And again, like you said, the stunts in this are exceptional and everybody's great in it. It is top to bottom. Clarence Williams III is in it for a small part and is great. Like, there's so many good people in this. And the movie, I couldn't believe how quickly it ended. I always forget, because the ending, I will admit, is a bit rushed. I wish they'd had 10 minutes more for the ending. But the thing that's shocking about it is you realize, geez, this has been a 90-minute almost film, and it's over so quick.
Yeah, I think if you're a fan of William Lustig's work, and I, you've probably seen this already, but really look at the body of his work and the pictures he's done. He's never done anything again like Maniac Cop 2. Nothing. The closest thing you could say he's done to it is probably the Relentless picture I mentioned with Judd Nelson and Leo Rossi as the detective in the film. That was a theatrical release, blah, 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 blah. But even those films didn't seem like it had the heart that like a Maniac Cop 1 had to it. But we mentioned different things. One's a Grindhouse picture, that kind of thing. But you look at Maniac, and I know there's people that are going to say that's his finest film and stuff like that. Is it? I think people know that film more for Spinell than William Lustig. And I'm not being disrespectful when I say that, but when you say Maniac, you think of that central performance, amazingly done by Joe Spinell in that film. I think this is his shining moment as a director, but it's almost so, Joe, that you almost can't believe he's the director of it.
Well, and that's the thing about when you talk about Maniac and Maniac Cop 1 is those, as you said, are I don't know that there's better examples of that type of New York filmmaking of that time. And so, yes, with Maniac, Spinell just dominates everything. And I think it's between his kind of bizarre nature of acting. You do forget it's a Lustig film because honestly, you're so riveted by Spinell, it really almost wouldn't matter who the director is, to be honest. I'm not going to say that Lustig didn't do a good job. He did a great job. Maniac is fantastic. But Spinell is the movie. And then Maniac Cop is, again, but when you actually watch it, it's a great film, but it's very simple. It's a very straightforward film. Maniac Cop 2 just amps everything to 1,000. And so when you compare them, there is no comparison. And so, yes, this is Lustig's masterpiece. And it is beautifully shot. I mean, it looks great. And the stunts are fantastic. Everything about it is really, I can't imagine how you do it better. So, yeah, this is Lustig's best film. It is a Lustig film beginning to end. And it feels like it, that he really knew this was the movie he wanted to make. Like Maniac was the setup, or Maniac Cop 1 was the setup for this. And now he had control and he was going to do what he was going to do. And he does it exceptionally well.
Yeah, and that could be that a film like Maniac Cop 1 or Relentless that I mentioned, maybe doing those two films gave him the power kind of thing to do this kind of picture. And crazily enough, when you look at this movie, you'll be amazed that this was not a theatrical release. This was direct-to-home video back then by, I forget what company released it, but I want to say MCA Universal, but I don't think that's it. But yeah, SGE maybe. Anyways, this was not a theatrical release. This was direct-to-home video. This looks like like I said before, it's very slick. Everything's well done. Lighting, photography, everything's well done. The acting. We haven't even mentioned veteran actors that are in here. You mentioned Williams there, but Charles Napier has a small part in it that was meant to go to Larry King, the talk show host in it. We mentioned him because his girlfriend at the time was in Elves. But Larry King was supposed to be that part, and Charles Napier came in at the last second. You mentioned Spinell was supposed to be Turkel. Leo Rossi came in, and I know Spinell he's a great actor. He could have done that role, but I think we got Leo Rossi's performance of a lifetime here for him. I think he's just amazing in this movie. You can't take your eyes off his performance, in my opinion. That's how good Leo Rossi is in this movie. And if you know his other works. He's unrecognizable in Maniac Cop 2 with the beard and the teeth and the hair and everything that they put on him. You'll double take when Leo Rossi comes on screen, because you're, that's him? But it's him, and he knocks it out of the park. I think he's the real shining star of this movie, and I love Davey in it, but Davey, but Leo Rossi I think is amazing in this movie, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, just what Spinell would have done would probably have been equally good, but different. But I think I can't imagine anybody else, even Spinell, doing what Rossi did here, where again, he's got this weird manic energy where everything because the risk is that when you have a main character who can't talk, which is the Cordell character, even though, yes, he's doing everything physically, there is a limit to that if you don't handle it properly. And I think there's two ways you can do that. You either kind of deploy him selectively, or you give another character as a partner who is doing all the talking. And what they did was they gave Rossi all the kind of over explanation. And, there's a point where he's like, all right, you mean we're thinking the same thing, and we're going to raise an army of outlaws. And you realize very quickly that, okay, that's not going to work out the way that you think it is. But there's this middle part of the movie where they're basically the gruesome twosome. And it's great to watch the two of them doing things in a completely different way. And Rossi's like cheering. He's like, my friend's going to come get me, because they catch him and they have him in prison. He's like, you better watch out. My pal's coming, and anybody who's in his way is going to get... And we have to mention, because we haven't really gone into it, we have a scene where we have Claudia Christian and then a stunt actress hanging out of a car that's driving at high speed, which looks exceptionally dangerous. We have that is unbelievable to watch, because they're clearly not driving slowly. This is not one of those things where they're speeding it up. There's some speed in that car, so that could have gone wrong in about 100 ways. We have a scene where the Maniac Cop is walking Terminator style through a police station, throwing people multiple lengths of different offices, which is a great little effect where he's going through all of it. And then we have our prison scene at the end, where the actor who's on fire is on fire for a long time, at points where I forget how long one of those shots goes on. And that's a risk. I don't care how many people are there with extinguishers or whatever. That guy is fully engulfed for a long, steady shot. And it's all impressive. It's just great.
Yeah, there's several big, what I would say, action pieces in this movie. I would say one, of course, we're going to give it to you right off the bat of the movie. You're going to go into the convenience store, and it's not Steven Seagal or Van Damme or Chuck Norris or anybody like that. It's Maniac Cop. The guy that plays the villain did it uncredited at the convenience store. He is the same actor that was the grocery store robber in the movie Cobra with Sylvester Stallone. It is the same actor. He's still a working actor. I can't think of his name, but he's still a working actor. I looked up his credits. He's still doing stuff today. But yes, the grocery store robber from Cobra is the convenience store robber at the beginning of Maniac Cop 2. And we get a really slick set piece there with smoke machines and cool lighting, all that kind of stuff to start the movie off with a bang. And it certainly does that in that opening scene, Joe.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the thing is that you think when you see Cordell in there, you think he's going to kill both of them. He kills the store owner, and then he hands the gun back to the robber, who's then runs out, which is, I mean, the thing that's also interesting about the movie is you forget for a while that Cordell is a wronged party. He was actually screwed over, and they get to it at the end. So the resolution, which... I don't know whether you would bury him with honor after all the people that he murdered, but, whatever, who cares? Very much, which I don't care. In this movie, I'll let anything go. But there, as I said, for a long period, he is basically a Jason Voorhees type, and you just know that he will be murdering anyone in his way. And then the movie at the end comes back to the fact that, no, this is not somebody who was always like this. He was a great cop who got framed. And so this is the cynicism of Robert Davi's character, where he's talking about, there's a thin line where cops go from justice to going over the line, like all that. And you're right, that's a Coen staple. And the only problem with that is it's very, very compressed to the end, but I don't care. Doesn't matter. But really, this does feel like I would almost have believed that they would have filmed these movies back to back, outside of the fact that the tone is so different, because it really feels like they just pick up where it's literally the next day or whatever from Maniac Cop. And it's just like, nope, keep going. We've got a zombified cop back in, and we can't afford Bruce Campbell anymore. So we got to bring in somebody else, and we'll make him even more grizzled and hard boiled and, give him a fedora and the whole 9 yards. And it just works perfectly. It's just nothing. Again, like Elves, I have nothing to change about this movie. I really don't.
I have one, and I'll get to it. But we mentioned the first big set piece, the beginning, the opening convenience store with great smoke machine lighting. Everything is awesome there. I would say the movie moves along at a breakneck pace. It's never boring. It's balls to the wall action from start to finish. But I would say the next really big set piece is probably the police precinct that you mentioned. I would say when you watch this, don't try to over-examine it, because it's clearly a bunch of balsa wood set up probably in a gym or somewhere like that. It's a movie set that you can go in and destroy, which is exactly what they do in this movie. And you mentioned the impressive shot where he picks up one of the police officers and literally throws him through multiple beams of the police station, and then he goes through a wall into the jail cell area. So it reminds me a little bit of the stunt that Treat Williams has in Dead Heat, where he's on the motorcycle and flies off the motorcycle, flies through a window, and then slides across the floor and shoots 2 guards that are in this pharmaceutical place. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. But that's another great set piece, I think, Joe, and they really went for it there, because it's all massive squib hits that are spraying blood all over the place. None of this is digital, people. Back then, this is 1990, so the police precinct, I think, is the big moment everybody, when they watch this movie, would go back to. And besides Bruce Campbell being knocked off early, or Lorene Landon, who played Hundra, by the way, in the 1983 movie Hundra, which is great, they get knocked off kind of early, but this is setting up a different thing for Maniac Cop. But the police precinct thing, I think, is a scene that everybody talks about, Joe.
And the thing that sells it, even though, yes, of course, if you actually really think about it, of course, this is not really he's not going through wood beams and everything else. But again, Zidar's performance in that role, it makes it believable. This is the idea that, yes, this is a person who would walk through a wall with no thought about it whatsoever. And so that's what I mean about I'm always re-impressed by how much physicality he put into that role, and manages to sell the fact that this is basically an unstoppable machine, which he is until the very, very end. And even, as we'll find out in The Stinger, even that didn't stop him, which of course it did. There had to be another movie, because I think this did very well. Understandably, I'm sure it was. And like you said, that this wasn't in film theaters is a crime, because this would have blown theater doors off, I guarantee. And somehow they didn't realize that, or it just wasn't made that way. But this is one of those where when you watch it, you sit there and go, okay, I don't care if we intended this for the video store. We've got to put it in a Manhattan theater, because at this time you can still play movies like this there. And it would have been well known. So yeah, that centerpiece with the police station is beautifully done. One of 3 major set pieces, which are perfectly, the pacing is, as you said, great. You never have a minute to stop. You don't get bored. Nothing is going on. It's just moving. But that is probably the big moment, and they put it dead center, which is exactly where it should be.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it's a shame this went direct to video, but you know, when you think about the movie now, Joe, think of this. It was set up like a theatrical release. The first few minutes of the movie are just a recap of the end of Maniac Cop 1. A big little tight synopsis, if you will, or a recap of part 1 done in the first couple minutes of this movie. And they do that in that all the time, where, okay, people won't come see this because they didn't know what the first one was or whatever. So we're going to tell you what the first one was in the opening 2.5 minutes of this feature, Joe.
And my theory on that is that what they probably were doing with that, and I think it's the correct thing, is they were looking at the original, which was, as you said, a very grindhouse film. It's a very specifically toned film. And they figured, okay, that's not everybody's thing. This is more of a mainstream type of film. And so we'll do the recap so that people might just only ever watch this and still know what's going on. And it works fine. I mean, you really don't need to watch the first one, and you know everything, because, come on, it's a zombie cop. We don't need to watch the whole movie to know what's going on here. It's very simple, because they show the major pieces of him getting assaulted in the shower. And then the rest of the movie explains that you guys set him up, and this is why he's going after you. And the guy who gets thrown through the beams in the police station is actually the person I feel the worst for, because they just hired him and he's like, who's Matt Cordell? Why is he coming for me? And wasted, gone. It's not his fault. He wasn't involved, but he's a cop, and that puts you in the way, and game over. He's just destroyed. And he has this look when he gets picked up, he's like, no, I'm not involved. Nope, gone. Bye. Just dead.
Yeah, we mentioned Larry Cohen, his corruption themes, all that stuff. It's all in this movie. This is clearly a Larry Cohen script. For Larry Cohen fans, watch Maniac Cop 2. It's got all of his staples, cynicalness towards, the government. All those kinds of things are in here, all that kind of stuff. As we mentioned, the Maniac Cop is set up by, like, corrupt business people or corrupt bureaucrat Congress people, all that kind of stuff. And then, we find that towards the end of the movie. And then it makes you backtrack and wonder, where are they going with the Cordell character? Is he a good guy? Because he just murdered a bunch of people in a police station. But now you're telling us he was set up by, dirtbag politicians and stuff. So now what happened? What are we supposed to think now, Joe? Is he a good guy, bad guy? What are we supposed to think of? At the end of Maniac Cop, what are we supposed to think?
Well, that's the tricky bit, because I think you're supposed to kind of be torn on it. Even when Davi, he swings from one side of it to the other, because again, up until the point where they essentially, when Davi's got the commissioner in the car and he's basically saying, yeah, this is your fault. You did this. And the guy admits that it is. Up until that point, this is purely a murder machine. And I don't think you're supposed to see him as anything other than villainous, unless you'd seen the first film. And that assumes you remember the fact that he was set up. But even that in the first movie doesn't really matter, because he's still the villain all the way through. I mean, you want him to get killed, and of course he does get killed. But in this movie, there's a certain beat going along, and you know what's going on. And then, yes, they throw this swerve at you where they're like, yeah, except he should never have been in prison to begin with. All the things that happened to him are what made him into this. You created, this is like the Batman Joker thing. You made this guy, and he is specifically coming for you. And in this movie, he's mostly, in fact, I think, does he kill anybody that's not a cop? I don't think he does. I don't think he actually kills anybody who's not a cop. So within his view of the world, he's justified, which is a warped thing to have the movie say. And then again, in the graveyard after he's buried, Davi is basically saying, yeah, you know what? Cops' morality can go a lot of different ways. So he's almost kind of saying, agreeing with what's going on without condoning it, saying, yeah, some cops do the wrong thing. Now, I think he's referring to the commissioner, but that's the same thing. Davi and the commissioner, they're both police officers, right? So one is trying to maintain justice and the other is corrupt, just to show you that, like people, there's a lot of gray in between. And so what is Matt Cordell? Really a villain? Or somebody who was wronged? And I mean, he's supposed to be brain damaged. So it's an interest. As you said, one of the things I love about Larry Cohen is Larry Cohen doesn't seem to believe in anything. He's just like, every system possible has a flaw. Let's see what happens. I mean, it's alive. God told me to, the stuff. These are all, Q, all these movies explore this idea of, it's not black and white. And so what happens if we kind of tear a little bit of the edge? And that's what I think Maniac Cop 2 is doing. One of the reasons this is a great film.
Yeah, I will say, I love this movie to death. I watched it twice in the last few days because I loved it so much. And I just thought, wow, this is just so slick. And the performances are awesome. Leo Rossi's performance. And I will go to the one thing, and this is not super minor, kind of major, but the one thing I didn't like about the movie is they build the relationship between Leo Rossi's crazy high-energy Turkel and our Matt Cordell zombie cop. They build this awesome, weird, crazy relationship between the two, and it's going along throughout the picture, and then, like at the drop of a hat, it seems like Leo's character turns on him and tries to stab him in the back, while he's fully engulfed in flames and stuff like that, and then we get the big stunt piece where he tackles him out the side of the building. That's too quick of an ending for that character, those two characters there. We needed something else at the end there, I think, Joe.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. That's this is the biggest flaw, and it's not that big a flaw. It doesn't kill the movie for me, but the ending does feel like it's 10 to 15 minutes too short, and that's probably because it was made as direct to video, and they were like, no, 90 minutes, that's your cap. Whereas if it was made for theaters, it probably would have gotten that 10 to 15 minutes, and there would have been more of it, because as you said, what happens is they tell Cordell, yeah, we're gonna retry it. We're gonna, we know what happened, and we're gonna, bury you with honors, all this stuff. And so he immediately, and this makes sense to some degree. This is a slasher trope or a serial killer trope of a certain type, where the one thing that has to happen to stop the killer happens, and so the killer stops. And that's what this is once justice is delivered, then he stops killing, which again kind of goes back to, is he really a bad guy? Because as soon as they admitted what they did, he stopped. And so, okay, there's a moral gray area in there. But yes, the problem with that is that Leo Rossi immediately goes, you were never my friend, stabs him, and then they go out of the building together. And it is so quick that you would almost think, was there a scene cut? Did we miss something? Because this happened really fast. And I think it's probably because they just ran out of time.
Right. That's the only thing I don't like about this picture, and I love this movie to death. But the only thing I don't like is we built an awesome, crazy-ass relationship with these two, and then it just ends at the drop of a hat kind of thing. And it's right. You either ran out of time or stuff. Like you said, if it was direct, if it went to the theaters, they could probably easily have tacked on 10 or 15 minutes to maybe develop something different there. But, if that were the case, Joe, and it was going to go to theaters, why not cut the opening footage of the first movie off then? And then you have that time, to play with new footage and things like that. So I'm just brainstorming here. But yeah, Maniac Cop 2, I adore it to death. They did make a part 3, it's Badge of Silence. I think I'm going to revisit that. I remember not liking it that much when it was released, but now I think I've always loved 1 and 2, but I think I need to go back and revisit 3. For the longest time, Joe, there was supposed to be like a series of Maniac Cop in development. And it's one of the big names in movies and stuff. I can't think of who it is off the top of my head right now. But somebody was working with William Lustig to do the series, and then apparently it all died off, and he said it wasn't happening. But yeah, I'd be down for that.
Oh, look, this is a movie that could easily be revisited. I think the fact that especially this movie, because they do play around with the idea of whether he's a villain or not, I think you can do a lot with that. This is not an uncommon thing, is the idea of somebody who is taking revenge for something that was wrong. So you could do all this, and you could, the only reason I don't know if it would work is I just don't know. Number one, you can't recapture that New York tone of the original. You're just never going to get that again. It's just impossible. You could try. Yeah, you can't do it. And the second one, I'm not saying somebody can't do it, but I don't know. You are going to have a high bar to meet to equal this film. And will anything ever be seen as something other than, well, it's a lesser retread? And I don't know. If Lustig had worked with somebody and that was going forward, I'd say yes, because I think Lustig would be able to keep it, he'll be able to tell you what to do. This is his baby. And in fact, I did see that he did say he considers this his best film. So even he knows, he's aware. And so a modern one would be interesting, but it's one of those movies that I sit there and go, well, is there really anything you're going to say in a new one that wasn't said in Maniac Cop 2? And I don't know, because my biggest problem with a lot of reboots, sequels, retreads is, are you telling me something new? If not, I'll just go watch the original. I wouldn't be against it. I just don't know if you can match what this movie is, because it's so perfectly crafted. So I don't know.
The stunts and things like that, you're never going to get. I don't care how much CGI is out there. The full flame fire suit ending kind of thing is amazing to watch. Like I said, part of it is like, how did this guy survive this take where he's on fire without a cut for like 25 seconds or whatever, and then he tackles Leo Rossi out the side of the jail building and everything. It's really awesome. This is really This is the perfect blend, and I will say it's a near masterpiece of blending action and horror together. I think this is definitely in the running for like best B movie of all time for blending those two things together. And I'm not talking about stuff like From Dusk Till Dawn. That's an A-lister all the way and stuff. This is still a B movie at its heart. I think everybody was just firing on all cylinders and just were like, awesome, Joe.
Yeah, I really have no complaints. We agree the ending is rushed, but even so, the movie is so well done that even that rushed ending isn't enough to make it not be a great film of its time and of all time. So yeah, that's the other thing is every actor, every performance is great. The stunts are exceptional. Today it would be probably a lot of CG blood. It would be, that type of thing, which is not something I'm against, but it's never going to be the same. Would they do the stunt work in like him throwing people through windows? Would they do that stuff the same? I don't know. Maybe they would. Probably they wouldn't. Would it probably be too slick? I mean, I'm never going to say that nobody should ever remake anything because there are exceptional filmmakers all over the place and we get these wonderful surprises here and there. But this is one of those movies where it's going to be so hard to get to the level that this is at. And part of it is because Lustig clearly loved this character and these characters and these stories. And he had it at the right time with the right people and made it the way he wanted to. And that's very hard to replicate anymore without, if it's a lot of money, producers are going to start saying things. And if it's not enough money, can you get to this level again? It's hard to say. I would love to see somebody make something of this caliber. But if it never happens, at least we've got this, and I'm fine with that too.
Yeah, my parting shot on Maniac Cop 2, if you have not seen it and you're watching our show here, my suggestion to you, and Joe may agree or disagree, my suggestion to you for if you're watching it for the first time, or even if you're revisiting it for the first time in a while, watch this film in high definition. Don't go back and watch a YouTube copy of it. If you want to watch a YouTube copy of the first one, the Grindhouse type Maniac Cop 1, hey, go for it. But this is meant to be a slick production. Watch it in high definition.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Fortunately, this is very easy to get in Blu-ray, and I have it. And it's great. And I actually, the funny part is I have this one, but not the first one. So that should tell you something. Even though I love the first one, the one that I want a perfect copy of, the best possible copy of with all the pixels, it's Maniac Cop 2. So yes, this one is far easier to see in high definition. It's on Tubi and I think a bunch of other free services. The Blu-ray is dirt cheap because people don't appreciate good stuff when they see it. So you can buy it for an inexpensive price. And as we've said, this movie looks like it should have been in a film theater. It is that well made. It's just astonishing. If you don't know that it was direct to video, you would never think that watching it. This feels like a of its time, big budget action film. It looks like it. It performs like it. And that's all you can ask. That's the best thing of a movie like this is to have it be indistinguishable of the top tier movies of its time. And it absolutely is that.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. So we're leaving you tonight with Elves from 1989. See it. You will not believe the story. You will not believe the dialogue throughout the film. And you won't believe the fixed mouth of the elf singular throughout the film. I highly recommend seeing it. Maniac Cop 2, if you want a fun, slick, balls-to-the-wall action horror product, this has got to be one of your number one draft picks kind of thing. So, Joe, any parting shots for Elves or Maniac Cop 2?
I think it's a great double feature. I really do. I think it gives you the best of both sides of this era. One side is drug-fueled insanity that doesn't seem like it should ever have been made, and we're lucky it was. And the other side is somebody who was the master of their craft at that time, making the perfect version of their film. So really, you cannot do better than to watch these movies together because you get everything. I mean, you just do. You get everything in a pair of movies that are 3 hours beginning to end. So perfect double feature for the holidays.
Joe, when people want to know more about Joe from Ozone Late Night, where can they go?
Very simple, ozonenightmare.com. Everything you could possibly want to know and probably a lot more you will find there. Very easy.
For Joe from Ozone Late Night, I'm writer and director Len Kabasinski of Killer Wolf Films. Thank you so much for watching it. Again, check out my works on patreon.com/killerwolffilms, the very best way to support my works, past, present, future. Go check it out and support the show, people. Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy New Year. I'm sure me and Joe will be back next month. We've tossed around some different things we want to do. I threw out there, Joe, maybe we need to do a B-movie Namsploitation series where we pick a few Namsploitation things. What do you think about something like that?
Whatever idea you come up with, I'm there. Sounds good to me. Let's talk more movies, because that's my number one thing. Namsploitation? Sure, let's do it.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, everybody.